Meredith. I'm with Helix Environmental Plan. And as you just heard, this meeting is being recorded. Due to some technical difficulties, I'm going to go and stop my video now, but we will keep working on this. So I'd like to start by welcoming everybody today, and thank you so much for joining us for this meeting. Today, Carolyn, next slide, please. Carolyn, next slide. Uh-oh. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. We're just working on it. Give us 1 minute.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
Okay, we've got the next slide.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you. So today we are going to be doing a short presentation here, starting about the Urban Forest Management Plan. We're going to start by talking about the process, then review the results of our initial public outreach that has been done over the last few months, and then go through a summary of some of the background assessment of the existing conditions, the tree canopy, land cover, the city trees, and then talk about next steps. And after the presentation, we just have an open discussion period and for questions and answers from the audience, and we hope we'll have a great discussion. Next slide. Great. So our the Davis Urban Forestry Division has actually gone through some changes in the last year. So in 2021, just last year, it joined the Public Works, Utilities, and Operations under the City of Davis from Parks and Recreation. And they also have hired a new urban forest manager in 2022. And PWUO, Public Works, is committed to developing an online dynamic urban forest master plan, which is this process we're going through, and then really committed to implementing it, and is really excited about taking great care of the urban forest. Next slide. So before we get going, I just wanted to go over some definitions that we're going to be talking about today. So when we talk about the urban forest, that includes all trees within the city on both public and private property. And then we also are going to be talking about the city tree resources. And that includes all the trees that are managed by the city. And those trees are located in public rights-of-way, which are often considered street trees, in parks, the green belts, any natural areas and open space areas, and then trees at city facilities, like maintenance yard and things like that. Next slide.
Meredith, I think you have a little bit of a lag when you see the slides, so I'll just go ahead and jump in and let you know we've got the next slide up.
Okay, sorry about that then. Thanks, we'll not pause. There we go. So the Urban Forest Management Plan, the purpose is to communicate the community's vision for the future forest, and it will provide recommendations that guide the care and planting of trees and the growth of the canopy cover. And the purpose of this plan, or as part of it, it is going to actually be looking over a 40-year time span. So it's a very long-term vision. Are we on the next slide?
We're still on the same one.
Okay, sorry. Next slide, please.
Now we're on the next one.
Okay, so our scope and the progress. So where are we in this process of developing the Urban Forest Management Plan? We have completed Davy Tree, who is the lead on this project, Davy Resource Group, has completed the resource analysis, which we're going to be presenting today, and the tree canopy and land cover assessment is also completed, and they've done a background and operations review and interviewed a number of collaborators in the city. We are in the process of community engagement by being here today as well. And then upcoming tasks are to update the master tree list for the city and then also develop the urban forest management plan. So we're approximately halfway through the process and ready to really start jumping into the bulk of that document. Next slide.
Next slide is up.
Great. So to start off talking about some of the public outreach that was done so far, we started with doing some pop-up workshops. We've done 2 of these. They were held at the Farmers Market on August 27th and then on September 24th. And at these pop-up workshops, visitors could come by as they are doing their shopping and just out and about in the city to review some posters with information about the project, talk with the project team, and give us information to help identify where they needed more trees, where they wanted more maintenance, and just leave other general comments. And between the 2 events, we had approximately 90 participants, and they were pretty evenly split between both days. Next slide.
Next slide is up.
So what did we learn? We learned from these events that the community really loves their trees, and really their value for both shade and for wildlife habitat came up over and over again. There was a really strong interest in kind of having more trees in the city that were fruit trees and native trees, kind of two interests there. And there were also a lot of people that had real concerns about trees that are in poor health or that were causing damage. And people were very familiar with the trees in their neighborhood. There was a lot of discussion about, well, there's this tree right here at this location. And so people are very connected in the city to their trees in their neighborhood, which is great. Next slide.
All right, next slide.
We also asked specifically about how have you felt about the Urban Forestry Division level of service? And there were concerns from some people about whether there was maybe inadequate maintenance. And one of the things that came up a number of times was in watering young trees and making sure that young trees got enough care to survive. Also some concerns about tree removal that maybe wasn't necessary, and a real desire to make sure that the Urban Forestry Division is pruning trees rather than removing them whenever possible, and also kind of concerns and a desire for a successional planting. So knowing that as trees mature and maybe die or have to be removed for various reasons, that we have new young trees coming up so that the canopy is maintained in perpetuity. Next slide.
All right, next slide.
Yep. One of the other outreach events that went on was a photography competition. This was organized by one of the partners in the project, Tree Davis, and they had 17 participants who submitted 73 separate entries over a 4-month period. And they have said that the winners are expected to be announced by the end of the month. So unfortunately, I couldn't share a picture on the slide, but I'm sure that they are really great and we're looking forward to seeing them. Next slide.
Okay.
Thanks. And so then the another opportunity for the for public comment was that there was a virtual comment box on the city's website for the project. And as of October 19th, 27 people had submitted comments. All of the respondents told us that they were residents of Davis. And if you go to the next slide. This is a summary of the kind of responses. The comment box had very open-ended questions, and so we've reviewed a lot of the comments that were received and kind of separated them into major categories. And obviously some people had concerns or comments on more than one item, which is why there are more than 27 different things here. But you can see here that one of the most common comments was about improving maintenance provided by the Urban Forestry Division. There was also a lot of interest, again, in planting either native trees or climate adapted trees that would really thrive over time. Also in providing more shade. And again, those watering trees came up as a fairly common answer, and then also increasing management resources. So there were concerns about whether there was like staffing levels. And then also invasives, some comments from a few people about social justice and looking at that in relation to tree canopy in the city. And then concerns about solar panels and trees, and particularly in parking lots. Next slide.
Okay.
Great. So just to sum up, so all of that public input will be summarized in a short summary report that will be included as part of the Urban Forest Management Plan. And then that information was also going to be used to inform that management plan if there are items or key points that people have raised that weren't being considered by the team, that's brought them to light. So it's very useful information. And now we're going to start into just a review of some of the assessments that have been done on the kind of the existing conditions of the urban forest now. So this map shows the urban forest tree canopy and other land covers. So you can see that existing tree canopy in the city is approximately 26% cover of the whole city. And then there are some other areas of bare soil or grass or low-lying vegetation that give opportunities. Those are possible places for adding more trees, but we don't expect to convert all of those areas to tree canopy, because we need some areas may be used for parks, ball fields, or other non-tree places. So the projected canopy potential for the whole city would be just under 48%, as shown at the bottom. And you can see in the pie chart over on the side, the other large area is impervious surface, which is about 44% of the existing city is impervious surfaces, which is paving, like roads, sidewalks, also buildings, and other things like that. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay. And then this image shows the urban forest tree canopy by kind of averaged by census block group. So you can see here, this just helps give a little bit more graphic image of where is the densest canopy, because although the existing canopy is approximately 26%, it's not evenly distributed across the city. So you can see the darkest green areas tend to be in the older neighborhoods, and those are the areas with the highest canopy coverage. In each of these block group areas, they range from 14.6% canopy in the lowest cover areas, all the way up to about 36% in those highest covers. And that's how we get to that average citywide of approximately 26%. Next slide.
Okay.
Great. So we also looked, Davey also looked at the condition of the urban forest. And so they used some near infrared imagery and assessment, which was captured by satellite imagery, to look at the health of the urban forest. And as you can see in the pie chart, the vast majority of the trees, 82% of the vegetation, is in good or better condition. So overall, the urban forest and the vegetation here in town is very good. And you can see the little expanded image just kind of shows that this, what this looks like. You can actually get down into some fairly fine detail when that assessment was being done. And these maps are going to be available online shortly. So if this is of interest to you, you can come back and find areas of interest online, and you'll just keep an eye out for that. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so this talks about the benefits of the urban forest. And so as you can see, the urban forest provides benefits in many ways. One of them is that there is just stored carbon in woody biomass, the trunks, the leaves, all of the branches of the tree and the roots. And that has a value, a projected value of about $9.8 million worth of carbon storage. But really, maybe I think of possibly more interest is that it provides annual benefits to the city in terms of improving air quality, improving stormwater quality, and also as the trees continue to grow, continuing to capture CO2 out of the atmosphere and sequester that carbon. The modeling, so this is all modeled based on the amount of canopy there is in the city, and those models show that these trees each year remove 57 tons of air pollution from the air, and also capture 16.9 million gallons of rainfall on the bark. So that's all rain that then gets captured and kept from running into our storm drain systems, which is great for reducing flooding and just generally improving our stormwater quality. So these are some ways that we can actually quantify the benefits of the urban forest in Davis. Next slide.
Okay.
All right. So now, well, from looking at the entire urban forest, there's also an analysis of just the city trees, which are a subset of that urban forest. All the city trees were inventoried in 2018. And as you see, there were 30,692 trees that were on that list at that point. And those are all the trees, as I said, that are managed by the city of Davis. And so of that 30,000 trees, there are 207 unique species. However, about 70% of those of the city trees are one of like 12 species. So there's a few species that are much more common than others. But our top 4 species are London plane, Chinese pistache, crepe myrtle, and valley oaks. So as people I know we're very interested in trees, valley oak is actually one of our top 4 most common species in the city trees. And no trees represent more than 10% of the overall population, and there's not any one genus that is more than 20%, which is good. We want to keep a diverse urban forest to make it more resilient to pests or changes in climate and other things. So that's great. The species diversity is kind of following the generally accepted best management practice. And so these city trees have a value estimate of over $91.5 million. So they are a very high value city resource. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay. So this also looked at the condition of the city trees, and of note on this is that this condition assessment was done as part of the inventory. So this was where everything was done on with somebody looking at each and every tree, as opposed to the condition of the urban forest that was showed earlier. They are slightly, that was done using near infrared satellite imagery. So they're not quite apples to apples there. They were done slightly differently. So you can't totally compare those two numbers. But the city trees generally, as you can see, the vast majority of them are in fair or better condition. There are approximately 6% of the trees that are in poor condition. And at the time of the inventory, approximately 300 trees were dead. And so knowing these conditions can helps the city anticipate maintenance and funding needs, because then they can use the information in this inventory to be able to plan how they're going to be needing to replace or maintain their trees. But I think the big message is a lot of these city trees are really in good condition. Next slide.
Okay.
Right. And so one of the great things is that we also then looked at the benefits of just the city trees, just that portion of the urban forest, and just those city trees also, you can see, have storing a lot of carbon, and just that portion of the urban forest is providing over $200,000 in annual environmental benefits to the people of the city of Davis. And these are just they only quantified some of the benefits. Like you can quantify, and there's models that were used to make an estimate of what was the dollar value of their improvements to air quality, to stormwater, to carbon sequestration. But there's other benefits from city trees and from the urban forest, like reducing energy costs, through shading and cooling, and also non-quantifiable benefits like increases to property values, public health and welfare, and wildlife habitat that aren't included in these estimates. So this is the conservative estimate of the benefits that's actually, if you could put a dollar value to all that, it would be much higher. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Great. And so the additional information, if you would like to see more detail on these resource analyses, it was presented to the Tree Commission. There have been 2 presentations to the Tree Commission on July 21st and August 18th. There's a link down in the bottom. That's all of that information is available on the city's website. And you can also look at the Urban Forest Management Plan website as well. Next slide.
Okay.
So where do we go from here? As I mentioned earlier, our background research is essentially complete. And from here, the draft Urban Forest Management Plan is going to be prepared. And then that will be put out for public review. We will be holding another public meeting in the spring, which will hopefully not have the technical problems. And there will also be the online comment box will also remain open. We will collect the comments at the beginning of December for this initial period, but it will remain open all the way up through the spring. And then after until sort of early March, after reviewing that public meeting and the online comment, the final draft of the Urban Forest Master Plan will be prepared, and then it will be presented to the Tree Commission and then to the City Council. And just all of these yellow boxes that are on here are opportunities for public input and review of the plan. And then once the City Council has accepted the plan, it will be on the website, the city's website, in basically perpetuity. Next slide, please.
All right.
All right, so we would now love to discuss any questions that you have and hear any input that you want to provide if there's something else. And I think if you could raise your hand in the webinar and we will call on you. And if you're either think of something later or you are watching this on the recorded version, you can continue to please submit your comments through the city's website. That QR code will take you there as well. And I guess let's open the floor for discussion.
Well, thank you, Meredith. And I just wanted to add one thing. So I am Adrienne Heineck, Assistant to the Director of Public Works, Utilities and Operations here with the city, and have been working with this great team on getting this Urban Forest Management Plan together. We do have representatives from Davie Resource Group here with us tonight. If there are specific questions about our plan, in addition to Carolyn and Meredith from Helix, who have been providing the presentation, we also have Charlie Murphy, who is our city's Urban Forest Manager here for any questions that you might have. So like Meredith said, please go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to speak. I will go ahead and let you unmute yourself and And if you would like to wait just a sec and I can allow you to talk, I'll call you by name and we'll take it from there. So thank you. All right, Elaine, you may unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, I'd be interested in getting a little more information about city trees that are on private property. This is a big bone of contention with a lot of citizens. They don't know what their responsibilities are for these trees. And, you know, I'd really like you to discuss that.
So I'm not sure who wants to grab that. I might start. We do have some city trees that are on private. Well, we have city trees on private property, mostly through developments. We have 10-foot easements on these properties where trees are planted, and they are city maintained trees, but on private property. One of the challenges that we've had is that we will have folks who will plant trees in that 10-foot easement on their own. That are not city trees. So sometimes it can be a little more challenging for us to identify what is a city tree and what is a private tree. But part of our ordinance spells out that if there is a city tree planted in the 10-foot easement in your front yard, then residents are responsible for watering and caring for that tree. But the city would take care of the major prunings and the larger types of maintenance that would need to be performed on that tree rather than the homeowner. And Charlie, I don't know if you would like to add anything to that.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Our biggest issue right now is really being able to determine the trees that are and are not the city's responsibility. And we've been working pretty diligently on that, but one of the big pieces, presumably tied in one of the outcomes out of this plan and process will be a new inventory of the trees in Davis. And while we do that, and when we do that, understanding ownership, who planted it, where does it lie within that easement and or property, because there's several tiers here. I actually just had a conversation today in terms of people calling things city trees versus private trees. And so the city does have trees on private property within that 10-foot easement, but there are also trees that are protected by city ordinance in parking lots and developments in apartment complexes and things like that. But those are not technically city maintained or managed trees. They're just trees protected by the city ordinance. So that's a very strong distinction when we're talking about trees. But for the private ones, as Adrian just mentioned, ideally the young tree watering and helping the tree to become established is what is expected or hoped for from the residents of Davis. That being said, we do have supplemental watering from in-house crews as well as Tree Davis when we are planting trees. But just that additional care as young trees is really what we're looking for. But anything in terms of pruning and removals and long-term maintenance that typically falls on city crews and or contractors.
Does that answer your question, Elaine?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Thank you. All right. So Yael, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, hello. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's working on this plan. Thanks for all your hard work. It's been long awaited and it's really important. So I look forward to seeing the final product. I had a question about the last slide, which I believe was the timeline. And it showed that the last step was the plan being presented to City Council. And so I'm curious, what happens after that point and how does the plan go from being a plan to actually getting implemented and not just sitting on a shelf? Thank you.
That's a great question. And I can start and ask Charlie to take it from there. But I would say that this is the plan. This is the plan to get the plan. in place, right? And then you're absolutely right. There is the next step of the plan, which is how do we implement? I think one of the things that we've learned through this process is that we have a lot of work to do. And so probably what we'll do is be taking that plan, looking for any additional resources, if that's what is part of the plan that we might need, and then put together, I guess, a sort of part two in terms of how we would take those next steps to, like Charlie mentioned, have a new inventory, and then develop some tasks, I guess a roadmap to those tasks that are identified in the plan as being sort of our highest priority next steps, which would be a little more talking, but hopefully would get us moving forward to having those recommendations implemented. I don't know, Charlie, if you have additional thoughts.
Yeah, so I think obviously not all the things that are in this plan are already somewhat being implemented, but I think at the baseline of what we do within forestry, and since I've been here in the transition back into Lou City and utilizing the inventory that we do have and starting to really manage forestry as an asset management rather than just kind of running around and putting out fires is like, I think that's probably one of the major building blocks that this plan is kind of being built off of. And so to ask how do we get this plan implemented, I think we're kind of already implementing it to some degree, but this is going to help us streamline things. This is going to help start holding more accountability to the things that we are doing, making sure that we're doing all the things the proper way. And then a big component of this plan is the ability of folks on this call and many others to kind of start using this to figure out where we're going to get more money from, whether that's from local funding sources, outside grants and things like that. A lot of the work that I did in Baltimore, writing grants and going after funding, it really helpful to have something written down that you can point to and say, hey, this is where we're trying to go. And you're not sitting down and trying to write a grant from scratch every time funding becomes available, because you already have where you want to go and you know how you're going to get there. You just need the money to do it. So writing grants and finding funding sources becomes a lot more easy to kind of push that plan forward. But I think regardless to this time plan, when we present to City Council, when the final draft is officially stamped and sent along, I think we're already kind of dabbling our toes in the water, if you will, to kind of get this really kind of rolling in the right direction.
I would agree. Does that answer your question, Yael?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right. Greg, you may unmute yourself.
Here we go. Can
There you
hear me?
are. Yep.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with Yael. It's great to see the work you're doing, and wonderful job. Exciting to see all this come out on our urban forest. And I just had one question pertaining to the 30,692 trees, and that's what percentage of those are public right-of-way trees versus park greenbelt trees?
Davey, could one of you two answer that?
I can hop in. So we haven't looked at that breakdown yet. I think that there might be a category in the inventory where we could do that. What we do know is the canopy percentage at each of the parks, and also the potential canopy. So whatever areas the city staff determined were actually plantable, so where there isn't a ball field or another area, maybe there's roosting habitat or other wildlife concerns. So we know what the potential is for these parks as well, but it's not a count of all those trees. So that's something that we can explore further.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up, I believe, is that, I suspect there are a fair number of trees, municipal trees in the parks and green belts. And I don't believe Public Works and their crews of certified arborists are maintaining those trees, if I'm right. Those come under the rubric of the Rec and Park Department, and they have contractors who
Greg,
maintain the parks and the green belts. And as far as I know, I don't know if the professional standards required of those contractors are the same as what's required of the contractors who are maintaining the street trees.
so
And
Greg,
so I'm just wondering if you've seen any difference, if the data, the inventory data, show a difference in the condition of the trees that might reflect, the way they're being managed differently by a different organization within the city.
Greg, so I can answer your question, all your questions actually. So in our data, and I'd have to go back to exactly how this was defined when the inventory was collected, but we do have the division of types of trees to greenbelt trees, which it says we have a little over 8,000, park trees, which we have a little under 6,000, private trees. I'm not going to define that right now because I'm not positive what it's defined as in our system, but that's 10,000 trees. Right of way and street trees are at, let's say, a little over 14,000. So we do have the divide of that. And then in terms of maintenance, the trees within parks and green belts and along our streets are all under me in our forestry division. So they are being dealt with by our contractor. Now, that being said, that they are also on the block pruning schedule. So for example, right now this year, they're over in West Davis. So they've pruned and block pruned through Arroyo Park, Westwood Park, and a few others over there. And they're doing some of the green belts. In fact, I literally this morning drove to, I'm still new. I haven't learned all the names of the green belts, but I drove to the entrance of one of the green belts with Sean, our West Coast contract general foreman. So they are doing that. Now, I think one of the things that we have to look at is how well they're doing it when it comes to, say, like the more natural forested areas along those parks and belts, because I don't think they're getting too into the weeds there. They're doing more of the front facing into the park situation. So I think that is something we need to be working on. But also I want to recognize that on a street tree, if you're not in the black pruning, let's say you had something wrong with your tree and you're not going to be black pruned for 3 or 4 years, the likelihood that the resident at that house is going to call that in and it will be dealt with as a separate SR rather than waiting the 7 years for black pruning is much more likely. In a park, it's very much that bystander of just kind of walking by like, oh, that doesn't look nice, and then just keeps walking. So things that are in parks or greenbelts do tend to last longer because they're not called in, and forestry is all of 3 people right now. So we can't put eyes on everything until it is called in. So hopefully people are calling those types of things in. And if they are extremely problematic, we're getting on them quickly. Otherwise they enter into our queue of getting work done, but it should all be getting done by West Coast. Now, there is a divide when it comes from trees to the shrub level. And that is where it goes over to the Parks and Community Services division within Davis. I hope
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Greg. If we have any other additional questions, please raise your hands. I know we've got some folks here that have not asked a question. Any additional questions for our folks here today? Like we said, this presentation will be posted online. We also have our information on the Urban Forest Management Plan website, and we do take public comment through that website as well. All right, Elaine, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the requirement that the parking lots have 50% tree canopy? Because as you know, a lot of the parking lots don't have anywhere close to 50% canopy. One of the things I'm thinking of is when a development is first put into place, a parking lot, say, of a development, the developer owns it, but they may sell the property. So how does that work as far as, because it's the developer agreement, I believe, that would have the requirement of the 50% tree canopy. Well, if the developer leaves, who takes over? The owner? I don't know. I mean, that's a real problem. I think that the 50% tree canopy in the parking lots is not happening. And how can we enforce it?
Sure, that's a great question and point, Elaine. That is one of the things that we've been noticing. We have a running little joke of every time you read chapter 37, which is the tree ordinance section of city code, you'll learn a little something new or something makes a little less sense. And one of the things, so that the 50% shade canopy over parking lots is actually in city code. So technically it's not in the developer agreement. The developer agreement designs or ties the designs to reaching that in the time span that is allotted. But what we're finding is the issue is it doesn't matter necessarily who owns the property when the time ends. The issue is that there is no enforcement mechanism within city code, whether it's the same owner or not. So that is something that we're working on. Obviously, as this plan is very crucial in how forestry is going to be operating. And I think one of the things that we're looking at post that, or as that's getting wrapped up, is turning our attention back to the tree ordinance section of city code so that we can really tackle some of these really major concerns that you just, one of which you just mentioned, as we update that tree ordinance.
Well, and I think I might add that, the idea of the 50% shade cover is in the code when the development is put in place as the 15-year goal. And so when the development is built and finalized, those trees are planted. There are, of course, a number of things that can occur with trees in the interim between when that is, when it's planted out and when you've reached that 15 years. And I think, really what we've been talking about with the tree commission and through this process, just like you said, Elaine, and like Charlie said, is the enforcement piece of it seems to be the piece of the puzzle that we need to focus on, and that is missing in this process, to be sure that what we have in our code is something that we can enforce in a collaborative way, of course, with our property owners, but just to be sure that we can keep and maintain that canopy that makes such a big difference.
Can you tell me what the relationship is between the urban forest management plan and the tree ordinance? The tree ordinance isn't part of the urban forest management plan, is it?
It is not. So the tree ordinance is a separate document. It's part of the city's municipal code. The urban forest management plan really sets the vision and the goals for what we would like to see with the management of the urban forest, for the next 40 years, with, of course, a number of check-ins along the way. And the ordinance sort of provides the backbone and the enforcement piece of those vision and those goals. How do we get to, a canopy cover goal that we might be looking for? How do we make sure that folks understand that they can't cut down trees that are the city's trees in that 10-foot easement on their property? All of those things would be what the enforcement would be provided for in that ordinance. So we work together, but they are separate documents.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine. All right, so I see that Greg McPherson, you may unmute yourself.
No, I didn't have my hand up, did I?
Oh, you do.
Oops, My mistake. I put my foot in my mouth.
No problem.
Sorry.
All right. So do we have any additional questions for our folks here today? We'll wait just a little bit. If not, oh, so Greg, you may unmute yourself.
I guess I'd just be interested in, is there anything that you have found surprising in the work you've done thus far?
That's a great question. I think I will say that really, I worked for the city for a little over 15 years, and there's very little that will surprise me. Certainly with some of our projects that I work on, or the divisions that I work in, are utilities, for example. It's very complicated. It gets very complicated very quickly. I think there was a part of me that didn't necessarily see how complicated our urban forest management is. So that's something that I've really appreciated in being able to dive into this process and learn. I'm sure Charlie has a great answer, given that he also jumped in mid-planning.
I will say the most shocking thing to me was that Sacramento goes by the city of trees, but Davis has 6, maybe 7% more canopy than the city just to our east. That really caught me off guard, especially because I came from Baltimore, where I didn't think our canopy was very high, and it was around what Davis is, a little higher. So I'm curious why the city of trees nomenclature gets knocked around pretty loosely here out west. But no, other than that, honestly, it's been a great start to my time here, because so easily I could have come here and this thing was already done, and I just became a cog in the machine moving forward. And the ability to like sit down with some amazing people and talk historically and figure out what happened historically really allows for learning from past mistakes and learning what worked well, so that we can kind of move forward holistically. And it's just not a new person coming in and just pushing the gas on something that was created, but understanding exactly what went into it and what's coming out of it. So that's been very, very exciting for me, at least.
Well, thank you, Greg, for that great question. All right. So do we have any additional questions? We will be talking on Thursday with, next Thursday with the Tree Commission about some suggestions from that commission on goals and vision for the plan. We are also inviting all of our commissions who have assigned liaisons, and I believe at this point we have 9, to provide additional comments as well. And that's on top of our individual interviews and the public comment that we've received so far. We really appreciate how invested and how passionate our community is about our trees and the management of our trees. And really everyone wants us to see moving forward with something that is going to maintain that wonderful, to Charlie's point, what helps define Davis, right? Maintain that for years to come. So if there are no further questions, and it looks like there might not be, although I will say, so Greg, you do still have your hand up and you can unmute yourself. I want to be sure I'm not missing a question. All right, the hand is down. Okay. So I think if that is it for the questions, if you think of something that you didn't ask today and you would really love to ask, please go ahead and submit those comments through our website. We do have the QR code here, or if you just go to cityofdavis.org and search in the search bar for Urban Forest Management Plan, that page will pop up, and please send in your comments. We will have an additional comment or virtual meeting, I should say, once we have a draft in place for folks to walk through that draft with us. And we really appreciate you spending some of your evening with us tonight. So with that, I will say goodbye from our City of Davis team, from Davie and from Helix. And thank you so much.